This is Bev, and welcome to the Path of Currency. Today's video is all about League starter builds, and more specifically, builds that I am personally considering playing. I spent the last few days researching, and these 5 builds are the ones that I feel extremely comfortable recommending and also League starting myself. I have a minimum criteria for any build. To be considered, it must be able to unlock 2 Watchstones, have good clear, and be day 1 viable in terms of gear cost. One final disclaimer. Some of these build guides are not currently up to date for 3.21. I have made sure that they will not be nerfed and are still viable for 3.21. Some of these guides may be updated in the next few days before the League releases. If they are updated, I will update the description to the newest version. With that out of the way, let's get started. The first build I'm recommending is Grimro's Artillery Ballista. This was Grimro's League starter for 3.20, and it's looking extremely solid. This build is a hybrid ballista and self-cast style of play. Featuring basically 0 mandatory uniques, the budget for this build is looking to be basically a 3 out of 10. This comes from the 2 6-links required for Lightning Arrow and Artillery Ballista. Additionally, you will need a decent bow. Everything else is just random rares. The build clears the entire screen almost effortlessly. Being a totem build allows for good bossing damage while being safe. Survivability is also decent due to all the ores that are being used defensively. While Grimro did not make an official guide for this skill in 3.20, he did post a prototype. I'm also very confident that Grimro will be posting an update for this build in the coming days, so be on the lookout for that if you're interested in League starting this build. Next up, we have Subtractem's Frostblink and Fire Trap Elementalist. Running Ignite on Elementalist has been a tried and true League start option for some time now. Subtractem's spin on this build is to use Frostblink as the main clearing ability, so basically this is a Frostblink build that uses Fire Trap for big single target damage. Frostblink's unique cooldown recovery mechanics allow it to be spammed to easily clear the entire map just Frostblinking around. Along with the utilization of Ignite Proliferation, which allows for great clear speed. When dealing with tanky monsters, Fire Trap should clear them up with ease. The budget for this build to get started is very low, it's basically 1 out of 10. The only mandatory unique being Eye of Malice, which isn't even mandatory. It's also around a 1 chaos unique. A decent weapon will cost a little bit, but nothing that breaks the bank. Subtractem has posted a massive guide for this build, clocking in at over an hour long. Most of the time is spent covering every single item slot, so if you're confused about anything, his guide will probably have answers, which is great for newer players. The third build I'm recommending is Palsteron's Explosive Arrow Ballista Elementalist. Another ballista build, but I'm kind of a fan of totems in general, so I might be a little biased. It's just hard to go wrong with the ballista playstyle. You pop them down and you get to focus entirely on survival or even looting. This build is a little more advanced, so I would not recommend it for newer players, mostly due to the early game leveling not being straightforward, as you can't start with this skill. And there are some optimal attack speed breakpoints that you need to hit, but that's later on. 3.21 has buffed the build by giving it more projectiles from the tree, along with the Master Fletcher node being extremely cheap and annoying. Additionally, the new Flask Mastery gives 100% flask charges from enemies affected by ailments, which is everything you kill. The main reasons I'm recommending EA Ballista is because of how well it scales after leveling into the endgame. The clear is decent as you can off-screen mobs and you have Ignite Proliferation. It's not the best clear in the game, but I would rate it a B+ due to the delayed damage. But like I said, EA is a scaling beast, and with some investment, the single target goes through the roof. EA Ballista would probably have the highest single target damage out of all the builds I've recommended today. The budget for day 1 is like 3 out of 10, with the only mandatory unique being Diet and Dawn, which is usually expensive in the first week of the league. As for your bow, you just need an Essence Rolled +2 bow, which is cheap enough. The next build I'm recommending is Vortex Ignite Elementalist. Big disclaimer, this build is a weird League starter. You need to level his Wave of Conviction Ignite and play that before swapping over to the Vortex part. We will be following James Humphrey's Wave of Conviction leveling guide. To start off this build, leveling with Wave of Conviction is very easy. You just press Wave of Conviction while shield charging around. You also fit in Ball Flame Blast for huge ignites on bosses. The budget for this is just Wave of Conviction. The budget for the Wave of Conviction version is very low. It's basically a 1 out of 10, with no mandatory uniques. You can pick up Eye of Malice if it's cheap. That's why we play this until the transition into Vortex. So on day 2 to 3, the plan would be to swap to RueToo's Ignite Vortex. The budget for this is a little higher. You're going to want some decent cluster jewels as well as a Skin of the Lords. The reason for not just starting with Vortex is that you really need enough damage for it to feel good, but once you get that damage, the clear is crazy. You just have Vortex on left click and you breeze through the maps almost as fast AF, but without the 3 mirror investment. Finally, the last build I'm recommending is Zizaran's Toxic Rain Pathfinder. This is another tried and true build that will 100% get you to endgame with no major hitches. Whether or not you like the playstyle, on the other hand, is up to you. Toxic Rain is a bow build, but it shoots with somewhat delayed damage and it has some ramp time as well. If you can deal with that, you'll be warmly greeted with a very strong build. One of the big upsides to starting Toxic Rain is that you can start leveling as a Chaos Ranger right away, right after Hillock. And leveling is very easy since Toxic Rain scales with gem levels. Zizaran goes into more detail in his full guide if you're interested in the leveling process. The budget for this build is roughly a 4 out of 10. It's like the highest in this list. This is because Zizaran recommends the Devouring Diadem, which will most likely be extremely expensive. There is a tree setup that does not use this item, so it's not the end of the world if you don't get it day 1. Other than that, you'll want a +3 bow, and those can range from a few divines to 7 to 8 on Leaguestart. Some things to note are that this is utilizing the reworked Pathfinder Ascendancy. Some great new defensive options have been added, such as Enduring Life Flasks. Additionally, Pathfinder gets extremely strong wither scaling. The clear speed on Toxic Rain is decent. It's not going to clear as well as the other skills I've recommended, but the sustained damage and tankiness will make up for it. If you're considering mainly bossing, I would pick this build. I hope that these 5 builds help you figure out what your Leaguestart will be. If you are curious, I will be Leaguestarting Palsteron's EA Ballista myself. If you've watched to the end of the video, thank you. I am planning on releasing content aimed at making currency, alongside with Crucible discoveries after the league starts. Subscribe if you're interested in that. Peace.